Hi guys, welcome back. This is week 45 Project Life, and this week I am using a bunch of brand new stuff from the Citrus Twist store. Now I've got my photos printed out. I'm quite loving my photos this week. I used a bunch of prompts from over in my Patreon group on Facebook, and I was super pleased with how this whole week's photos really turned out. Bright and colourful and cheerful and perfect to go with all of this new stuff from Citrus Twist. So first up, I am going to stack a bunch of stamps from this Currently stamp set. I'm going to stamp them directly straight onto my photo using my Brilliance Moonlight White ink. I print at home on an inkjet printer using Canon Photo Glossy 2 paper. That's my secret for stamping directly to photos, is the photo paper. This paper just absorbs ink so nicely, so it is so easy to stamp on there, and I just love this Brilliance Moonlight White. It's got the tiniest kind of hint of shimmer to it, but it really is just so opaque and white on a photo. Even a photo like this, the background isn't super dark, and it still stands out really nicely, even though I'm using some very thin stamps in there. Now I wanted to add a little bit of colour, so I'm going to add one of these chipboard stars. Look at those colours, aren't they delicious? You can see what I mean about matching my photos perfectly this week. So I kind of just added a little peachy one on there just to break up all of that green of that photo. You know, I'm not like a huge green fan. There's a lot of green in here this week. So I want to add some of the other colours, and I'm kind of taking them off this photo montage here, I guess, from one of our early morning walks. And I'm going to add some stars up here onto this grid photo as well. So I'm going to add a couple. What I thought I would try and do is stamp onto this chipboard. Like, it's got a really nice kind of matte papery feel to it, and it did. It stamped beautifully. So I'm going to stack a couple of little sentiments on there. It says this day, and I stamped that in sort of a darker yellow ink so as that it didn't take out like too much emphasis off the photos, but it just is a tiny little detail that adds on there. And I added a second star up there as well. This time I picked out kind of a sky blue, and so I'm pulling colours from that photo grid. I've got the yellow and the blue both on those in the photos there, and I just kind of think it pulls out those colours really nicely. Now it's time to add a little bit more colour in here, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm pulling colours out of that photo grid at the top using the Sweet Story 6x8 paper pad. You know, it's a favorite of mine. I've been using it a ton this year. It is now available in the Citrus Twist store as well. So luckily I've got a new one to use because I have definitely used more than two this year. So one of my favorite paper pads from the entire year. I used that pink polka dots down the bottom, and I've pulled out this lovely yellow for my title card. Now, what I want to do though is I probably should not have trimmed that down to a 4x6. I'm going to add a couple of strips to just some white cardstock that I've trimmed to 4x6. I just kind of eyeballed these strips. The one at the top's a little bit bigger than the one at the bottom, but I've left enough room in the middle here that I can add my numbers. So these are from the Big Numbers stamp set. I love them. I'm never going to run out of numbers again. I'm going to stamp those in the middle, but I want to add something to add my date stamping to. Not necessarily a label, but I want to add just another little layer in here. So hence why I've only adhered the top and bottom of those yellow strips. Just kind of am looking through this pack of die cuts with like a billion different tickets and bits and pieces in here, finding something I can layer in there. And then I just went with this little grey kind of ticket piece. I've tucked it down so that you can't see the like sort of sentiment that's on there, and it's just going to give me a little place to add my date stamping. Very awkwardly adhere the rest of that pattern paper, and then I can go ahead and stamp these numbers on here. I haven't actually stamped with these before, and they are fairly solid stamps, so I'm giving them a really good going over with my sand eraser. Luckily they stick very well to my desk there, so they don't wiggle around too much. I am just going to stamp them off in a little bit of spare card just to make sure that everything looks good, and it does. So I'm going to stamp those down right beside that little layered piece that I've added in there, leaving enough room on the left hand side so that I can add the word week. I'm going to really carefully to do my date stamping in here. I wanted to check that I had enough room. I didn't have quite enough room on here to add the full date stamp twice, so just partially inked up the first half and added the rest after that. And then I can add my sort of title, the week, in here. Now I also have like a bunch of different alphas to choose from here. Again, they're all in the Citrus Twist store. You know they're my favorite. I've got two different types, foam and little puffy alphas. I can't go past these bright sort of royal blue puffy alphas. They are just my favorite. The color is so vibrant. And I felt like it just kind of matched some of the other blues that I've got in my photos. Not necessarily the blues I'm using with the little star embellishments, but I'm just liking those little pops of blue all over the place. Kind of, I don't know, it just adds a little bit to the color scheme. As does adding this black label. Like, it works with the photo. Definitely at my desk is my happy place, but to get to cover up the big orange washi tape holder that was in the main focus of my photo, I didn't love that color in there so much. Now for this 3x4 photo, I'm going to stamp directly onto my photo with the Moonlight White ink. I'm using the Get Messy set. This is a huge set, 6x8. It is fantastic. There are so many great sentiments in there. And I decided I was going to add another stamp from the Currently set. I was a bit undecided about adding Today under there, Messy Today, because I've already used the word today, but I figured they were different days. It would not make sense to have that in there. Now my 3x4 card down here, I've got I think it's about a 3-inch, might be 3.5-inch photo square, which leaves me enough room on the other side to do a little bit of stamping. So I'm going to create, it's not really a sentiment, I'm just going to stack a pile of these stamps because there are so many good ones. So I'm going to stack them so that they're on the left hand side of the photo. I've got just enough room in here that I'm going to be able to stamp this larger Get Creative stamp, and you can see I can still add my photo in there and the stamping fits nicely. But more than one stamp, I want to add a couple. Well, I'm going to add a few more. So this one says just a little paper and glue, and there's another sentiment that stacks really nicely underneath there that says holding things together, which is true of life and of craft. I stamped those ones so that they were kind of under the polka dots. I'm trying not to stamp over top of those lighter polka dots, but kind of have the dots in the middle of the sentiment so that the stamping kind of looks like it's part of the pattern. So because there was that kind of gap, I stamped a smaller stamp underneath there. So it says Get Creative, Get Messy, and then I'm going to stamp This Happened on top. So just a little cluster of stamps. They all work nicely together. They work in and around that pattern. Then I can just add my photo, and again I'm going to add a little bit of extra color with some of those chipboard stars. I did decide to just kind of shuffle those photos around down the bottom because when I put the pink card back in, I didn't love that both of those clusters of sentiments were right next to each other, so I've just swapped them over. The pink kind of looks better on the left anyway, so it's sort of in opposition to the bright pink at the top of the photo. Now I'm going to do some repeat stamping, and a spoiler alert, this probably took me the longest amount of time for this entire spread, so I'm going to speed it up considerably because I chose the circle stamp first. I've got a kind of peachy coloured ink, again just to change up the colours a little bit. I've used that peach star in there, and so I want to add a little bit more peach, and I start doing my repeat stamping, and at this point, I already don't really love how it's working out. It looks a little bit heavy. It's a little bit sort of busy, but also my stamping was super bad. I kind of tried to persist with it, and I decided to cheat and skip out the middle where my photo is. And so by the time I get to this top row, nothing lines up again and I've got this really big gap. It looked awful. I'm not usually one for redoing something because it's not perfect, but this was so far from not perfect, it was awful. So I decided to start again, use something a little bit simpler. I'm using this going stamp. But you can see I gave up on that really quickly. The card that I had was that white textured card, and the stamping was looking really appalling. So what I ended up doing was not persisting with that. I stopped, I grabbed some smooth white cardstock and started again, and it just looks so much better on that smooth cardstock. So all I'm doing is really simply repeat stamping that all the way up, just kind of alternating the words. I just tried to tuck the tail of the G in between a gap between the capital G and the I, and that's kind of how I lined up everything as I went up the page. I learned my lesson this time though, and I'm not skipping out the middle, just in case things don't actually line up by the time I get to the top. I'm going to do the whole thing. You don't really save yourself that much time anyway, and so I end up doing the whole thing. And although the stamping's like quite dark, and so it still looks really busy compared to the circles. I think the biggest thing I had with the circle card was just that it didn't line up, so this one looks fine. All I'm going to do is stick my photo down and then have a look through that die cut pack and see if I can find a little bit of extra color, maybe a sentiment in here. There's not a whole lot to say about this photo. It really is just another one of our twice daily walks. But I did end up with this photo with this really beautiful light stripe across Lil. So I really just wanted to just emphasize that, and so I'm going to stick two of these little die cut pieces together. It says happy happy memory. I can stick those down and trim that off, and that's all I need to do for that one. I've got one card left, and I decided to swap those around as well, just because I'm going to keep this card a little bit on the lighter side, and again just add a couple of die cuts in here, and I think it balances out nicer having the white on the right hand side, because I've got those two heavier photos and the left hand side of this spread looks a little bit lighter. So swapping that peach stamped card, which again a bit busier, a bit heavier, swapping that onto the left just kind of balances that out. So I found one little die cut, and then I decided to use one of the stamps from the Get Messy set, but instead of stamping it directly onto my photo, I kind of wanted it to overlap the card and the photo, so I stamped that onto just a bit of scrap cardstock using that same peach ink, tying things together, and then just really roughly fussy cut that out. I did leave a tiny little white border around that so that it would stand out off my photo, and then it's just a case of sticking that all together. So I'm not creating a cluster on that one, just creating, filling up some of that white space, and that is this week all finished. There are some amazing goodies over at the Citrus Twist store right now, so do head over there. I will leave the link in the description box. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. If you want to keep watching, there are a couple more videos on screen. Otherwise, I'll see you next time. Bye guys.